helpful. Let's move our attention here to running back, and same kind of question here. What do you kind of see as the overall landscape? We'll start with that of the running back position.
So, I've talked to some other very sharp people, and maybe the top tier shouldn't even that big. If you want to decrease the top tier, maybe it should be Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, and Alvin Kamara as your three, because we know they're good players. We know they're going to get targets, and it's as simple as that. We know they're workhorses. Having said that, I think there's still risk baked into Kamara's outlook because of the question under center, whether it be Taysom Hill, who literally ignored Kamara for a 14% target share last year in his 4 starts, or Jameis Winston, who just didn't target his running backs. Maybe not the case. It probably isn't sticky to just say, he's not going to look to Kamara because he didn't target the running backs in the Bucs. Totally different situation. But I still think it's a question mark looming over Kamara, especially if we're guaranteeing him as a top 4 overall pick. So I have someone I don't have a question mark on, and I know it's controversial. I have Zika Elliott as my RB3, and I mentioned in my tiers why. But the fact is that last year, everyone is looking way too much into it after he averaged career lows in rushing yards and fantasy points per game without his offensive linemen, because in the months that the 4 games that Dak was available, Zeke was still the RB3 overall and averaged a career high 7.5 targets per game. Everything was there that led to Zeke being a good pick to begin with. He's only 26 years old this year, and with last year in the distance now, it could have been for the offensive line. He also faced the league's second toughest rushing schedule in hindsight. He also perhaps had COVID fall, because remember, he did get COVID during the offseason as well, and that affected Cam Newton. Like he said, it affected a lot of different players differently. So I don't know what the reasons are, but we should not be using recency bias to affect our outlook on Zeke, and that's why I'm going right back to him and ignoring everyone who is drafting him outside of the top 10 incorrectly.
Yeah, I'm with you actually on Zeke. I think I have him at RB6 or so. I flipped him and Henry. I know you have Henry right around 6. I have Henry right there at 3 and Zeke at 6, but I'm with you on all those points, given how good he was with Dak, with the line banged up. When he had a line, he was still solid. Plus all the, again, short season, but, he's in the best shape of his career. Dak saying, I've never seen him zipping around the field like this. For a player like Zeke, where we've seen the moments of the baby fat and a little slow and sluggish at times, I do weigh that stuff when he comes in with a shredded 6-pack when that midriff is looking in shape. It sounds so stupid, but I think it's important for a player like Zeke when he has that little bit of extra gear. He's so good at just churning anyways. Whether he's big Zeke or trim Zeke, he's going to be burning tackles. He's going to be churning through you. But if he has that little bit of extra gear, which we've seen, these first couple seasons where he was just a monster, there's no reason that this offense can't get back to those Dak levels of being the highest score. It was on pace to put up records for NFL scoring. Then you give me the best Zeke Elliott version of himself in that best Cowboys offense. That could be a beautiful marriage, and he could be the RB1. Nobody would be shocked if he's the RB1.
And agree. If someone disagrees with Zeke as an RB3, totally fine. I just needed to make sure I shoved him into that top tier because I believe that's where he should be. And rounding out that tier, of course, I have Aaron Jones, Derrick Henry, and Saquon Barkley. Aaron Jones, too, is probably controversial in the top tier. But again, you don't lose Jamal Williams' role, right, with 35 targets, 14 routes per game, and then suddenly hand that to A.J. Dillon because they're 2 totally different archetypes. There is a concern, perhaps, that Dillon outcarries Aaron Jones, but I cannot logically get there with that. And he's never been a pass catcher, even going back to Boston College, so he wouldn't take that third down role from Aaron Jones, and last year when Jamal Williams did it either. So I think Aaron Jones should also be, for his usage and pass catching ability, even from the wideout spot, in the top tier.
Yeah, I think he's significantly undervalued the way he falls mid-round 2. It's a joke. In that next tier, I think a lot of people have, Akers, Eckler, Mixon, Chubb, Taylor, Lair, Gibson, Harris. Love that tier. In general, are you avoiding those guys, though, from what you said earlier with that, how the history suggests receivers are the play in that second kind of round tier? Are you not really finding yourself getting too much of those guys, or how are you addressing that tier?
It always depends, but sometimes at the back end of rooms, it is literally possible to start Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs. And if that's the case, and then someone who everyone's down on, like a Joe Mixon for some reason, or Clyde Edwards-Helaire falls, that will be my RB1, and then I'll continue drafting wide receivers or pick 2 tight ends behind that first tier. But overall, I don't mind getting this tier as an anchor build in like round 2 or 3 to start, and then ignoring it until the next tier and just stacking 4 or 5 more running backs from there.
And do you have any particular targets within that tier? Once you've kind of avoided running back for a little bit, and now you're getting ready to address the position, what kind of players are you looking at to start getting back at that running back position?
I do love Joe Mixon. Again, recency bias affecting people's opinions from last year. I don't care. In the first 6 weeks, he was healthy. He led all running backs in touches. That's all you need to know. Also, and he lost Gio Bernard this offseason. And when they cut out Gio Bernard's role in the last 3 games, small sample I know, that he played, Joe Mixon averaged 27.5 touches from week 3 through 6. So he was just a massive workhorse. Love getting him as a touch-based RB1 in an offense that we know is going to return to being high volume, like they were in Burrow's 10 games last year when they were, per established runs, Pat Thorman, first overall in plays per game and the fastest pace and neutral game script while Burrow was under center. Beyond Joe Mixon, I've also been leaping as my anchor for Clyde Edwards-Lair, who currently literally is my highest roster player in best ball. I believe I just looked yesterday because someone mentioned it, and he is at 58% right now.
I love it.
He averaged, as I wrote in the tiers, he averaged 17.8 carries and 5 targets per game as the workhorse, even out carrying Darrell Williams inside the 5. He just wasn't good at running inside the 5. Don't care about that. I only care about opportunities there because it will regress in time. So he was the workhorse until they signed Le'Veon Bell. They saw what they got out of Le'Veon Bell, healthy scratching for the postseason. He didn't matter at all. And then Edwards-Lair returned in the Super Bowl, but we didn't get a full season. We just saw that first 6 games when he was treated like a workhorse until what they thought was an elite talent became available. And so I expect Edwards-Lair to go right back into that role from the first 6 games and surprise everyone with perhaps even a top-tier performance.
I'm with you. I think he is the one that I see jumping into that elite tier this year, falling into round 3. Given that offensive line improvements, we've talked about the Chargers, maybe the most improved line, but right behind him has to be the Chiefs with all the moves they've made along that front. I think it's going to make a world of difference how many times we see him get blown up in the backfield, especially at the goal line. I think that big line beef additions and all the removal around him, with, as you mentioned, I'm all about Hilaire there. So you got those guys. What about later? How do you round out your running back position? Do you find a couple guys that you constantly are landing on your roster? And when about are you starting to take those running backs?
So I will admittedly, in 3-man leagues, let's say, I will stop at Mike Davis and Chase Edmonds. Like that's where we get, which is like RB18, because that's where it gets very questionable. Even Chase Edmonds and Mike Davis, in my opinion, like I said, I understand why people are questioning their roles. And even though I'm higher on it, maybe other people are right. So I will just go with my research and still draft them as my RB4 or 5. And then that's where I stop pretty much. I try to make sure I'm loaded up at that position until and then not going running back afterwards for 3-man leagues. Again, trying to get ROI here. But for the 12-man leagues, when we get further, that's when I'll go below tier 3 and then get into the Gus Edwards, let's say. Damian Harris's ADP is incorrect because we know, we are 95% sure Sonny Michel's getting cut. And then ADP will jostle from there. Why wait? Why are we being reactive? We have to be proactive. Drafters are too sharp now. And so I love getting Damian Harris above ADP. We're knowing it's going to jump a month or 2 from now. And then beyond that, well, we don't have to get beyond that tier right now. But yes, that's kind of where I lean. I want more Trey Sermon, admittedly, but his ADP also is out of control. He's going as the RB 24 or 25 right now. And just, I believe it's poor practice to draft the first guy in a 3-headed backfield. Like Shanahan, even post-draft press conference, said he remembers his 3rd running back led the league in snaps last year. Also, the past 2 years, 49er running backs has led as a backfield in fantasy points, cumulative fantasy points. So we know they're going to score points as a backfield. We just will never be able to pick the right one, and I'll be damned if I'm picking the first one. So I've actually been waiting. You haven't got to this question yet, but I've actually been waiting, and I've been getting overweight on Wayne Gallman since the Jeff Wilson injury, who, by the way, since March, I was overweight on Jeff Wilson.
Gotcha. I love it. The Wayne guy. I've been sneaking him in those last rounds too. Love it, targeting that backfield, the cheapest potential option. It makes perfect sense for sure. And I love the Gus Edwards call too. I think he is the most unsexy, but like it's like the bus is the perfect nickname for him. It's not sexy. No one wants to ride a bus, but then you take it and you're like, well, that was cheap and pretty effective. And that's what Gus Edwards is going to be.
And like, I know there's hype for J.K. Dobbins, who we all love as a player, such a good player. But it doesn't matter. And Mark Ingram's 5 games he was healthy scratched for last year. Gus Edwards was only out touched 62-59. So Dobbins only had 3 more touches, and Dobbins only out targeted Edwards 6-5, just 1 more target. Literally mirror image, and yet it's Dobbins who's going literally 5-6 rounds earlier, which doesn't make sense at all. So I just take Edwards every time.
I'm with you 100%. Well, who do you consider the single best running back to take in best ball right now?
Oh, the single best. I mean, Gus Edwards honestly is up there. I'm looking.
Well, Lair's your highest owned, so it could be him too, right? Like,
okay,
yeah.
Well, okay, I didn't know if you're going to allow me to go into that rounds. Okay, so I'll say Lair, and that's because, like I said, getting those receivers at the back end or starting Kelsey or Waller and then a top receiver and coming back, Edwards-Lair is always available. It's actually pretty easy to start Kelsey or Hill and then Edwards-Lair and then complete the Chiefs stack too. So for a lot of different building reasons, I think Edwards-Lair is pretty much the best running back you can pick right now.
Absolutely. What is up, you fantasy wolf? Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, share your thoughts in the comments, check out some more videos, and join the newest Wolfpack by subscribing below.